2025. Things are definitely happening, and they are moving in a good direction, as can be seen on multiple fronts. Now, of course, the announcement of the death of Pope Francis is a very big one. And the reason why this is very big is because Pope Francis was killed in 2020 and replaced by a man wearing a rubber mask. And the reason why was because the families that control the dollar printing machine needed to have someone pretending to be a pope sign off on the big money documents. And U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance went to meet the rubber mask actor, and then right after that meeting, they were forced to announce his death. This means that what I'm hearing is they're going to offer the Peace Free Freemasons are going to offer a Philippine, an Asian pope in the hope of getting some Asian gold to back new issues of dollar. And they promise that this new pope will sign off on a future planning agency so that humanity can decide its own future. Now, the other thing, years of talking to the people who control the Federal Reserve Board has led me forensically to something known as the Institute of Religious Works, or the Vatican Bank. And basically, the people controlling the Western financial system were working towards this religious goal of staging Armageddon and then having their Messiah appear. And it looks like there's still groups that want to present someone as a new Jesus Christ to try to stay in control. So keep an eye out for that. I've heard they've got a couple of candidates they're looking at. So there might be some big propaganda pushing those lines. The main point is that they've lost the signatory. And there are three basically centers of Western power. There's the Vatican, which is named after Vatica, the goddess of the underworld. And then there's the City of London. And that's basically headed by the Committee of 300. And the final signatory is the monarch. It was Queen Elizabeth, and she did not give that signatory right to Charles. Instead, it goes to another individual who I'm in contact with, who's not directly related to the Windsors. But nonetheless, what's been going on is that a faction has been using a fake King Charles to keep the signatory rights for the Committee of 300 monies too. And that King Charles was kicked out of England and fled to Italy, the fake King Charles, just before the announcement of the death of the Pope. And now they're saying that King Charles will not be attending the Pope's funeral. So it's looking like another big signatory of the financial instruments is being removed. And, hopefully somebody who's with the white hats will replace him. And the other one, of course, the other signatory, the people who have a dollar printing machine, are the Pentagon. And that would be Elon Musk as their representative. And they're trying all sorts of stuff. I wish them luck. I think their heart's in the right place. And they do have a lot of high technology. And I'm hoping that they will reach a deal with the Chinese to trade high tech for Chinese manufacturers, because right now, if they don't have that high tech and they don't start making it available to the general public, they're going to lose this tariff war. And let's face it, I'd love to be able to get on a flying saucer and take a 20-minute trip to Canada, from Canada to Japan, instead of the 16 hours it takes now. A lot of stuff should be made available. I think it will be. But in any case, the removal of Francis is not the only one. And the important point here is it doesn't matter if the original's dead. What matters is that person is used as a center of power. So even if they replace him with a fake, as long as they have this person appearing in public, it means that this same criminals are still in charge. So the public removal of the Pope is a big one. Now, another big one is, we know that Klaus Schwab was killed, but nonetheless, now the World Economic Forum is publicly announcing that he's resigning, and they've, made some trumped up charges against him about, getting a massage on public money or something like that, instead of, mass murder, which is what he should be indicted for. So that's a change. And then, as I mentioned last week, the death of Richard Armitage has had huge repercussions in Japan now. I'm hearing that a lot of the religious cults that like the Moonies and the Science of Happiness and the so-called Gakkai Buddhist cult, they were used as conduits for money to control society. That there's some kind of huge crackdown, and that a lot of the Koreans who subcontracted control of Japan from the Rockefellers and stuff after World War II are being removed, and there's a sign of under a secret war to go back on the promise by the Biden or Biden regime to hand Japan over to China. That's being reversed. So there's some kind of huge changes happening here in Japan. Once they're over, I'll be heading to Canada, where I hope to be able to get in touch with the new government. Now, to be honest, I'm looking at the Canadian election, and what bothers me is that none of the candidates are talking about what they should be, which is, taking control of the Bank of Canada and giving it back to the Canadian people. Remember, from 1938 until 1972, Canada funded World War II, paid for health care, university, the Trans-Canada Highway, the canals linking the Great Lakes to the Atlantic. All this government spending was done with money created by the Bank of Canada. There was no need for taxes, no need for debt. So a true candidate for leadership of Canada should be promising that he will eliminate all taxes and do that by nationalizing the Bank of Canada and issuing government money. So far, none of them are doing that, but it worked very well. And it wasn't until Pierre Trudeau, who was blackmailed by Rockefeller over a video of him murdering a child, handed over that control to the satanic cabal. So that's what should be happening in Canada and the rest of the world. And of course, the battle is not over. I know, they publicly removed Klaus Schwab, but look who they replaced him with. Some guy by the name of Peter Brabeck. And if you look at this photograph, he's got a really weird eye. Some people say, but he says that humans do not have the right to free water. Humans, as if he's not a human. And the other thing about Nestle is they've got a long criminal history. They've been trying to force people to pay for water all over the world and cause a lot of damage. And my mother used to boycott them because she says they killed a lot of children around the world. What they did was they had women dressed up as nurses hanging out in maternity wards in developing countries, and they would show the infant formula to the mothers of the newborns and say, hey, this has more iron than breast milk. This is better for your baby than breast milk. And what would happen is these mothers would buy the formula, but they would mix it with water that hadn't been purified. So a lot of children died of diarrhea and from the contaminated water mixed with the formula. And a lot of the mothers couldn't afford it, so they made it dilute, and their babies died of malnutrition. This is the sort of company who, again, the World Economic Forum is not finished, and more needs to be happening on that front. But, some definite changes are happening. I'm guessing that soon they're going to, finally admit that George Soros has been dead for a long time. They've been trying to pump up Alex Soros as the new head of that empire. The problem is, I've been reading about him, and as far as I can tell, he's as dumb as dirt. Well, maybe that's a good thing, but there's going to be some kind of announcement on that front as well. So big changes are happening, but, it's going to be a slow process still. Now, the other thing I've noticed is that they had a archbishop who was accused of covering up, sex crimes by priests, a guy by the name of Mahoney, close Francis's coffin. I think they're trying to say, let's just, put all that child abuse stuff in the closet and forget about it. And I'm also hearing from U.S. politicians that they're still busily deleting JFK Epstein files, COVID files. But I do believe a crackdown will happen nonetheless, and they can't delete themselves out of guilt. I was very glad to see this little statement by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
We're back with more changes at DoD, and this time an update on COVID-19 and reinstatement. We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it. We're doing everything we can, as quickly as we can, to reinstate those who were affected by that policy. It hasn't been perfect, and we know that. We're having an ongoing conversation with you to get it right, working with the White House as well. We want anyone impacted by that vaccine mandate back into the military, people of conscience, warriors of conscience, back in our formations. We hear you. And we're working to get updated guidance as quickly as possible. So kind of here's where we are on more guidance we're providing right now. So in January, the president issued his executive order. We jumped right on it. In February, I directed the department to take corrective action regarding this specific department's unfair, overbroad, unnecessary COVID vaccine mandate. We apologize then, apologize now for how it was done, and we want to fix it. So today, I'm signing a memorandum that directs the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to provide additional guidance to the boards that are reviewing these cases concerning the review of requests from service members and former service members adversely impacted by COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The guidance also will facilitate the removal of adverse actions on service members solely for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine, including discharge upgrades, and less than fully honorable discharges for individuals separated for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. So we're trying to scrub all that, clean all that up. We'll also facilitate appropriate remedies for service members who have suffered additional career setbacks resulting from the previous administration's unlawful vaccine mandate. So that original EO addresses the unfair, since rescinded COVID-19 vaccine mandate imposed on warfighters during the previous administration. We know how bad it was. You know how bad it was. And through this guidance, which I encourage you to check it all out directly, because it's an update going even further than what we've done in the past, this memo is providing supplemental remedies for service members and veterans negatively impacted by the DoD defunct COVID-19 disease vaccine mandate. So more guidance here that we think is really important in getting this right, and we welcome you all back as quickly as possible.
Where he's saying it was an illegal COVID, was an illegal experimental vaccine. So that's a sign that legal action is coming. Now, the other thing that's happening, of course, is the situation in the Ukraine. Basically, the Trump regime is ready to walk away from those negotiations because the Ukrainian side does not want to reach a deal. They don't want to reach a deal because the Russian condition is denazification, and these people are Nazi war criminals, and they know that denazification means people like Zelensky will face the death penalty for war crimes. But if the U.S. washes their hands of it, that's it. It's game over. There's no military in the EU that can do anything about the Russians going in and arresting all these people, and hopefully that will happen. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now, I've been in touch with the Iranians as well, and the talks between the Trump regime and Iran. And again, the Iranians have made a lot of generous offers, and they've been getting some of their funds unfrozen, and they've been buying Boeing airplanes and other things from the Americans. But there's still a powerful faction that believes that it's their God-given destiny to start World War III by getting Iran and its allies to kill you, and the U.S. and its allies to kill each other. And there's still provocations on these fronts, but I don't believe, for example, reports that U.S. troops are going to land in Yemen. The reason I say that is because the Yemeni are attacking the sea lanes because of the genocide in Gaza. So I don't see U.S. troops fighting Yemenis to protect genocide. And I believe the U.S. has now lost 3 aircraft carriers, according to the Houthis. And I've seen photographs. It looks like they, well, I mean, they should just mothball the rest of them. They're out of date floating targets. They should not be around. Okay, looking elsewhere, there's been an attempt to sort of start a war between India and Pakistan. This is clearly because the attempts to start World War III with the Ukraine have failed, and the ones with Iran are failing. So they staged a massive provocation, and India and Pakistan, both nuclear powers, are now close to a state of war. But I believe that since they're both members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, that the Chinese and other people will come in and calm things down there. But clearly there are still desperate attempts to start something as these people see the inevitable arrest and trials for war crimes coming up. Let me quickly check my notes, see if anything else I got. No, we're good, except to say that the Dragon family, Russians, the U.S. military, Committee of 300, the Peace Free, they're all in favor of a future planning agency. So hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. But again, it'll have to wait until the new Pope is installed and the new king is installed so they can sign off on all this stuff. And we should see some big developments on this front in May. But for now, we're kind of in an interregnum. There's no Pope, there's no king, everything is, and there's no negotiations between China and the U.S. And this situation will probably continue for another couple of weeks. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. Could you please review all the dragon families, where they are, and a brief history, and what they have been doing for about the past 1,000 years?
Oh, boy. Well, I don't know about the past 1,000 years, but basically what we hear is that the white dragon is a Western society, basically, although it has a Chinese counterpart with the Chinese white dragon name. But they go back at least a couple thousand years, and they're basically teaching is we fight for the greater good, and we'll protect the weak and the innocent, but it's not going to make you rich or anything. The Black Dragon Society was sort of set up by the Japanese as way of opposing European rule of the planet, and they successfully created co-opted a lot of people around the world. A lot of people hoping in the non-white world that the Japanese would overthrow European rule. However, that the Black Dragon is no longer very powerful. It's just a few remnants, and the good parts of that group have been incorporated into the White Dragon. Now, the Blue Dragon, that has a deeper history. I mean, it is connected to the cult of the assassins in Iran, but there's also a Blue Dragon that's related to the top bureaucrats of Imperial China. It's a very meritocratic, very high level, very intelligent, and it's sort of a Eurasian thing with probably most of its base in East Asia. And then the Red Dragon is basically Chinese, and it's very closely linked to the Chinese Communist Party. And another one, a big one, is the Golden Dragon. The Golden Dragon, their thinking is avoid being too greedy, help people. It's sort of like stick to the middle path. Don't get too greedy. Don't get perverted. Don't overdo things, and and accumulate wealth without harming people. And they have a lot of money. So, we're hoping that a white dragon, gold dragon deal will come at the end of this, where the gold dragon will provide the gold and the white dragon will protect the innocent and the poor and work together to make a better planet. Anyway, there's a lot more to it, but that's a nutshell for now. Okay, next question.
Hi, Ben. On the last question, could you outline the Dragon family deal, why it would be better for the West, and which Dragon family is offering the U.S. this deal?
The Dragon family that's offering this deal is just known as the Dragon family. They don't have a color associated with them, but I think they're closest to the Golden Dragon. But all the different dragon families are part of the bigger, dragon family. And basically it means that an East-West agreement is possible. Right now, the East controls more physical and financial resources than the West. The West is still militarily stronger. So, they're going to reach some sort of deal. But the basic agreement is that from now on, our purpose as a species is to increase the amount and variety of life, including human life. So more plants, more animals, more babies, more families, more life. That's the basic principle upon which money will be released and dedicated to. And one of the organizations that will try to turn this planet into a heaven on earth, it will be the Future Planning Agency. But there will be others. Next question.
Hi, Ben. There is good news in South Korea. Lee Jae-myung is likely to become the next South Korean president and will negotiate with North Korea for reunification. Unless there wouldn't be any economic or diplomatic sabotages within South Korea, his temporary government could be a caretaker for the Japanese government. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that the North and South Korea were ready to join, and what happened was that when the Biden regime came into power, they forced the South Koreans to once again become enemies of North Korea and stop the move towards reunification. And now that that regime is gone, I don't see any obstacles to the North and South Korea reunifying. And there may in the future also be some sort of closer relations between Japan and the unified Korean peninsula. That'll probably involve some sort of strategic imperial marriage. But I'm in favor of the reunification in a peaceful way of North and South Korea. And I think the U.S. Would benefit greatly by reaching some kind of economic deal with North Korea. They have huge mineral resources, gold and titanium, all sorts of stuff. And they're asking for, U.S. mining companies come in with their big trucks and their big machinery to help, dig it up. So we should reach a deal with them, and that should involve reunifying the Korean peninsula. Next question.
Hi, Ben. The U.S. Treasury buying its own bonds being illegal, etc. If it's legal, it's only because the bankers made it so. It's not fiscally immoral. The Fed has done the same, sometimes called QE, other times called monetizing the debt. If you really want to end the Fed, then the Treasury will take its place and start doing exactly this, printing its own money to buy and pay off the Fed-created debt. This is MMT. If the military intelligence complex is really so financially illiterate that they just figured this out, is it such a good idea for them to take over the system? I think there's another group involved. See story 107. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the person who made those comments about it being highly illegal was one who set up the quantum financial system. And the point is that, the military understand that they don't understand, but they realize there's something wrong, and they've been working very hard on this problem. And at the end of the day, what they've agreed to is that there's going to be a jubilee. So they're going to just cancel all the debt worldwide on a one-off thing. So instead of printing money to pay off debt, just get rid of the debt. And then After that, a meritocratically selected group of very smart people operating under full public scrutiny will take charge of the creation and distribution of money. That's the basic outlines. The details will be worked out by experts, and there are negotiations along these lines in Rome and elsewhere. Experts are working on it, but the point is, right now, this Babylonian debt slavery system needs to be ended and replaced with something involving money created by and for the people based on real world things. Next question.
Hi, Ben. We have our last question for today. The Trump cryptocurrency coin has jumped in price yet again. Is this owned by the real Trump, or is the coin owned by the fake Trump?
I am guessing it's by the fake Trump. And I talked to agency types, Pentagon types, NSA types. They say all the cryptocurrencies have a backdoor. There's no way around it. They can basically pump up the price and then get suckers to buy, and then they sell it and take the suckers' money. My advice is stay away from cryptocurrency because it all has an agency backdoor, and they've been using it to steal money from people. Okay, well, that's it for this week, and I hope that we'll have more good news next week. So I hope to see you then. Now, this is the day that that Jesus Christ was murdered. He was tortured to death, and his body was put up for public display. And the people who did this to him are still in power. And I think 2,000 years has been enough time for these people to be tormenting us, and it's going to be over soon. And I talk with direct knowledge. I actually was sent by the Asian secret societies to negotiate with these people, and I went to Rome and to Milan to meet the P2, P3 Freemasons. And they took me to their secret headquarters, which is the Basilica of St. Peter, which is the first Roman Catholic church. And inside you can see the original skull and bones sculpture. And it's full of military, weapon designs. It's just kind of a military establishment. And they told me their goal was to create a single world dictatorship, or fascist, everybody under a single Caesar or Messiah to control and lead humanity. And the symbols they used for their power were always, they had these two keys to control society. One is you control the food, the other is you control the military. So and these days, it's the dollar printing machine and the Pentagon. And if you control these two, then you have supreme power. Because if you want to eat, you got to obey. And if you try to disobey, we will kill you. And then there's another group. This is the corner of the financial group. They have three keys. And the third key is, or the religious group, I should say, is propaganda. In other words, you control people's thinking. That's where the word government comes, control minds. So this is a system that has been in power in the West for thousands of years. It is basically now operating on Babylonian debt slavery. And that is what is coming to an end. And it's going to happen in a very good way. There's very good progress on many fronts. And now I'd like to get concrete about each front by having you listen to Commander-in-Chief Donald Trump, the real one, speak. And then I'll give you the backstory behind each comment. So first, let's see what he has to say about Iran.
And they said the attack is what?
That you waved off an Israeli plan to attack Iranian nuclear facilities.
I wouldn't say waved off. I'm not in a rush to do it because I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death. And I'd like to see that. That's my first option. If there's a second option, I think it would be very bad for Iran. And I think Iran is wanting to talk. I hope they're wanting to talk. It's going to be very good for them if they do. And I'd like to see Iran thrive in the future, do fantastically well. I know the Iranian people, they're incredible people. Always have been very smart, very energetic, very successful people. And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody. I really don't. But Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's, pretty simple. It's really simple. We're not looking to take their industry. We're not looking to take their land. All we're saying is you can't have a nuclear weapon.
Okay, I've been in touch with Iranian government officials, and they told me that they offered $1 trillion worth of Iranian stuff, and that the Trump administration is basically taking the deal. And this has caused the price of the dollar to plunge in Iran. Apparently, food prices are down 75%, and Iranians will be able to buy American cars and iPhones, and they're very happy with the deal. And the other thing people need to understand is it's nothing to do about this 30-year-old story about we got to prevent Iran from having nukes. I actually talked to the son of the Shah of Iran, the former king, who told me that George Bush Sr. gave him missiles tipped with neutron bombs. So they've had these. They tried to give them back to Obama, but he turned them down. So, Iran can obliterate Israel within a few minutes with just conventional missiles, or within a day, according to Colonel Douglas Macgregor. But in any case, they don't want to do this, and instead they want peace. Now, the other big piece of news is that it's a 70-person delegation of Saudi military are in Iran right now discussing the situation in Syria. This is part of an agreement that's being worked out between the Turks, that would be, and then the Persians, that would be the Iranians, and the Arabs, as led by Saudi Arabia, to replace the nation state or the satanic state of Israel with the state of Judea, which would allow all the Judeans to live in peace, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, or whatever. And that's in the works. So that's the backstory there. A deal is being reached. And the other part of the deal is that Iran is heir to the Persian gold, legendary Persian gold hoard. And at the very top level of the financial system, they don't accept paper. They want gold or something that really exists. So this is very useful for the Americans so that they don't have to just rely on Asian or Chinese gold. It puts them in a much better position. By the way, most of this gold is actually located in Thailand because that's where the Shah of Iran put it for safekeeping when he was overthrown. But the bottom line is there's not going to be a war in the Middle East with Iran. And these fanatics like Lindsey Graham, who wanted this, apocalyptic war, have been sidelined, as has been Mark Rubio. So that's all very good news. Okay. Now, the next clip I want to play is President Trump talking about Russia.
How much longer does Vladimir Putin have to respond to your ceasefire proposal before you put secondary tariffs or sanctions on Russia?
We'll see what that will be. We're going to be hearing from them this week, very shortly, actually, and we'll see. But we want it to stop. We want the death and the killing to stop.
Now, he's saying in this clip that he's going to reach a deal with Russia. Again, I've been talking directly with Russian FSB people. I've been acting sort of as a middleman. So what I'm hearing is the deal has already been reached. The Dnieper River will be the new border, and that Russia will be in charge of security in Western Europe, and that Odessa will become Russian, but it'll be a free port like Hong Kong, so the Ukrainians will not have to pay for exports. Now, I know there's talk about Trump getting rare earth metals from Ukraine and stuff, but that's really not true. And the point about rare earths is that they're everywhere. The problem is having the ability to refine that, and the Chinese have a lockhold on that. So it's not about finding rare earths; it's about the technology to refine it into products. And right now, the West just doesn't have enough of it, but I'm sure they will build it up. But in any case, the main point, the sticking point, has been that the Russians insist on denazification as a condition for peace in Ukraine, and that means the removal of the mass murdering Ukrainian government and their backers in the EU. So, for example, Ursula von der Leyen of the EU saying that she supports the Holy Talmud, which calls for the decapitation of all Christians and teaches that non-Jews are cattle that you can kill and cheat and rob with impunity. So obviously, this is not a sort of system of government that will be tolerated in this planet. And it's interesting that right now both EU and Canadian government officials are only taking burner phones when they go to the United States, because there's a state of war between the Nazis who still control Canada and the EU, and now the Russian-American alliance. So, but I have heard that a lot of the top Nazis are going down, and I'm going to talk about one of them later, Richard Armitage. His death has been announced, and I'll give you the backstory of that, but later. But let me finish by looking at the next Trump comment. This is the one about China.
Nobody can compete with us. Nobody.
You said there was a relationship with President Xi. Why not pick up the phone and call him and make a deal?
Oh, we're going to make a deal. We'll have a deal. I think we're going to make a very good deal with China.
Do you guys reach out to him and call him?
I think that you will see we'll make a very good deal with China.
Mr. President Trump, you told me Marine One a couple of months ago. I like her very much.
China, he's saying that the United States is going to reach a deal with China. And the deal that I understand is in the works is that the Chinese are willing to forgive all the debt that's been built up with trade deficits over 40 years. But they want in exchange for the Americans to have a more accurate, fact-based knowledge of China and Chinese culture so as to, dispel prejudice and ignorance. And once that is done, some sort of jubilee will be arranged, and then incredible amounts of funds will be made available for rebuilding the United States infrastructure and for restructuring the world economy in a way that it, benefits the average people and the living things, and not just Satan worshiping corporate oligarchs. So that's what's in the works. This is going to take time. Don't expect anything too quick. But as things stand, if the United States does not reach a deal with China, people will run out of iPhones very quickly. And it'll take until 2028 to bring iPhone production to the United States. And then each iPhone will cost $3,000. Okay, so that's what will happen if you don't make a deal with China. The other thing is Trump says he's going to make, or Scott Bessent, his Treasury Secretary, saying he's going to try to make a deal with 70 countries to isolate China. But, the Chinese provide people with products they use in their daily lives. The Americans provide people with paper and endless war. So I don't think that's going to work very well. And I've already heard the Indians and the Japanese have said no. So I don't think that's going to go. And I've heard that Scott Bessent has been sidelined. I'll get to that later. All right. Now, here's the final clip from Trump that I want to show you. This is him talking about Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve Board.
On Jerome Powell, you said that the termination of Jerome Powell cannot come fast enough. He says he won't leave, even if you ask him to.
Oh, he'll leave. If I ask him to, he'll be out of there. But I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
What I've heard about Jerome Powell from the head of MI6 is that he is on the way out because they have the military and intelligence community, who aren't very financially literate, have finally figured out that uh, the United States Treasury has been buying its own issues. In other words, uh, all the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, the Brazilians who actually earn their treasuries with real sales of real commodities have been dumping them, and nobody's been buying them. So the Treasury has been creating fake accounts in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg and through uh, cryptocurrency to pretend that there's someone buying that, and that's highly illegal according to the head of MI6. But what this means is that a move is now being made by the military industrial types to take control of the money printing machinery away from the Khazarian mafia and give it into the hands of the military intelligence community. And this also has to do with this P3, P2 Freemason agent by the name of Marco. I know his last name, but I'm going to keep it off the record for now. Who spent, many years in Asia trying to reach a deal with the Asians. He was apparently arrested by Korean types in Japan and tortured. I had nothing to do with that. I just found out about it. He eventually came back with a Shanghai Shek golden Buddha filled with diamonds, but he didn't get a deal. The deal is going to be reached with the Dragon family, and that is in the works, and that's what is sitting on Xi Jinping's and Donald Trump's desk. So a deal will be reached, but it's going to take a couple of months. This is big stuff, and it has to be done carefully and right. So that's what's going on there. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Richard Armitage, because they just announced his death from, pulmonary embolism, something in his lung. That's what happens when you get your head stuffed in a toilet or you're waterboarded. But in any case, good riddance. He's a cousin of Barbara Bush, so he's a descendant of the Satanist Aleister Crowley, and he's been the secret boss in Japan forever. I've previously said on the record that I was told by a member of the Japanese royal family and by a member of Japanese military intelligence that former Prime Minister Takeshita Noboru was taken. He mentioned in public the idea of selling U.S. government bonds, and as a result, he was taken to Alaska in a helicopter, and then hung naked from a helicopter, and then forced to run naked through the snow while he was chased. And finally, he was beaten to death, had his testicles stomped, and a video was taken of this, and it's shown to everybody who becomes prime minister in Japan. It was done by Richard Armitage, and basically said, if you don't obey us, this is what's going to happen to you. So his death is a very good thing. Now, I also have a personal problem with him. Now, as you recall, I've been kind of distracted recently because 200 policemen showed up at my house to forcefully evict me from a place I'd been living for 23 years. This is not the normal reaction to a dispute with a landlord over a leaky roof. I was denied a chance to put my side of the case in court, and those 200 cops were sent by Richard Armitage, and I was told that my life was in danger, which is why I temporarily evacuated to Canada. Well, now I'm back, and Armitage is gone, and hopefully a lot of the corrupt police under him will face jail for what they've done. But I will be going back to Canada because another reason I've been distracted is that my mother just died, and there's a lot of things I have to do, with the family home and other things. So I'll be back in Canada soon, and I'll be there for a long time this time. So that's what's going on this front. Now, let me quickly check my notes for a few other things that I might have missed. Okay, I've noticed that Stephen Moran, who's the head of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Trump, is saying the dollar's got to weaken, and he doesn't. This is a man who's actually in charge of advising Trump, and he doesn't even understand why the dollar doesn't weaken. And so I have to explain this backstory once again. the dollar is not a monolith. It's not a single entity. It's controlled by different groups. And what has happened ever since the Lehman crisis is that the dollars earned by people outside of the United States have been quarantined from new dollars being created inside the United States. So you have one group of people printing dollars and causing the stock market in the U.S. to go to, fantasy levels. And you have another group that refuses to accept these dollars for trade. And this is at the heart of the impasse. And this is what's been, blocking progress. You have the Western Khazarian mafia on one side, you have the Asian elders on the other. Each have their own dollars, and slowly but surely, by controlling real production and real goods, the Asians have been winning. So a deal will be reached, but the dollar is not going to fall because it's not American anymore. So that's something people need to wrap their heads around. That's why you can't just devalue the dollar and then make U.S. exports cheap. The United States will have to create its own currency or accept the Dragon family deal, which is probably a better choice. And the final thing I want to mention is some talk about the U.S. as a technology to bend time and space. I've run into this. This is sort of so-called Nazi time bell and stuff. I don't know. We'll see. But maybe this is a sign they're going to start releasing some of the esoteric technology they have. But believe it when you see it. In any case, the news is all good, and things are moving in a positive direction. And hopefully I'll be able to provide better reports now that my personal troubles are more or less behind me. Okay, now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. A week ago, you mentioned a new military alliance that emerged between Russia, Serbia, Hungary, and Slovakia. Could you please elaborate on that? From a Slovakian perspective, it would sooner appear that the government of Robert Fico is slowly giving in to the pressure of the EC. We can only hope it's a diversion from something.
Well, what you'll notice if you look at the reality on the ground is that the Austro-Hungarian Empire has more or less revived. They basically decided to close their borders to the uncontrolled immigration that was affecting the rest of Europe. And they have reached deals with Russia on gas and energy outside of the EU framework, and they have been blocking the EU in many things. And the fact that Hungary announced a military alliance with Serbia, and Serbia has a military alliance with Russia, shows that this is, basically the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russians joining forces. And this is probably mean the end of the Nazi rule of the EU over time. This will affect Germany and France, especially the de facto leader of that faction was Jean-Michel de Rothschild, known to us as Brigitte Macron. I have reached out to this individual to try to negotiate a surrender. So far, I have not heard back, but they don't really hold any cards. Their military is a joke. They wouldn't last 5 days against the Russians. Fortunately, the Russians aren't going to just move in. They're going to wait for the white hats to take over and arrest the Nazis without a war. But that's what will happen. And of course, economic deals do need to be reached, and that's probably what the questioner is referring to. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to have good relations with Western Europe, including the Russians. Next question.
Hi, Ben. What are your thoughts on lab-grown foods, specifically lab-grown meats? I myself am very suspicious. It seems like something Bill Gates would try to push.
Well, theoretically, if you could make a really nice steak or nice meat that you can't tell the difference from the real deal because it's made from actual cow flesh, but you don't have to kill a cow or keep it in inhumane conditions. I'm personally, in theory, in favor of it, but of course the devil is in the details, because if it's some kind of genetically engineered unhealthy monstrosity that's very expensive, then that's not going to work. But the idea of being able to make meat without killing animals appeals to me, as long as it's healthy and environmentally sustainable. Next question. Oh, one last thing though. Of course, if it comes from Bill Gates, don't trust it. Those people, they have a track record of trying to poison us, and they've already contaminated our food supply and made us all get cancer. So if it's coming from those people, don't trust it. Next question.
Hi, Ben. What are your thoughts on the tariffs? Who really has the upper hand? Does China need the USA market, or does the USA need Chinese goods?
Well, the fact of the matter is that right now exports to the U.S. only account for 2.7% of Chinese GDP. So they could live without it a lot better than the Americans. And, the Americans get all their cheap Christmas trees and their iPhones and their computers and clothing and everything else from China. And what do the Chinese get in exchange? Paper. So, you know, the the Americans would lose for sure, and that's why I think they're going to have to take the Dragon family deal and the very generous offer of a jubilee, a write-off of debt that's coming from the Asians. But all the experts say that the tariff war would cause everyone to lose, including the Americans and the Chinese. So it's best to avoid it. But I think Trump was right to do this in order to force negotiations forward instead of having things keep, status quo, kicking down the can down the road forever and ever. I think, he had to bring things to a head, and that was a good move. Next question.
Hi, Ben. I'm wondering if China's credit system and missing people are somehow related. First, credit system is introduced, then people disappear. Do you know anything about this?
My understanding about the missing people is that what happened was someone ran the numbers. They looked at the Chinese population a couple of decades ago, and then they used the official Chinese birth figures to calculate what the population should be. And they found that, the population should be much smaller than it is by a couple hundred or more, or as much as 400 or 500 million people less. However, I personally know a Chinese is where I go for a massage who was not registered at birth because of the one-child policy. So I'm suspecting that a lot of these missing Chinese are just kids who were born, but they didn't register the birth because of the one-child policy, which is why the official statistics show much lower population, or the birth rate statistics show a much larger population than what the Chinese government reports now. But I don't think it has anything to do with the credit system. And as far as I know, the COVID Wuhan thing killed about 10 million people, but not, hundreds of millions. Next question.
Hi, Ben. We have our last question for today. China got whatever upper hand it may have due to cheating and theft. Communism and centrally controlled economy are irreconcilable with free and fair trade and human rights. Intellectual property theft going back 30 years hasn't been remedied yet, and the Chinese are digging deep water ports in the Western Hemisphere. That's got to be nipped in the bud with full-on, no apologies sabotage. What are your thoughts on this? Could they ever be trusted?
Well, the Chinese government does have a track record of intellectual property theft, and I'm a victim. I know that they read my reports and they are published all over China, but I don't get a penny from it. But having said that, the fact of the matter is that they have a superior economic system, which is why they've had decades of double-digit growth or high-level growth. And that's why they're winning the trade war. And I keep saying the West needs to revamp its current economic system, because right now it's run by Satan-worshipping oligarchs who all they want to do is take the profit for themselves. They build super yachts and things like that, whereas the Chinese took the money they earned and they build roads and bridges and schools and factories. So if we don't want to become Chinese slaves, we need to make our economic system better than the Chinese one so that we outgrow them, we outcompete them, and we beat them by making, better stuff. And let's face it, all the inventions of the past, century or more, all been Western. I mean, computer chips, everything. And we still have that incredible scientific power. We just have a very bad, economic system run by corrupt oligarchs. That needs to be reformed, and hopefully then we can outcompete China. And yes, somebody has to call them out for all the unfair stuff they've been doing, but I don't think blowing up ports is the answer. I think taking them over maybe, but not blowing them up. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today. Now I hope to see you again next week. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.
Back to Doge just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marcia Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that Doge is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70.
And swear by my name like they taught my people of Israel to swear by Baal. If they do not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation. They're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. Asaph was a worship leader for King David, but we're also told he was a seer, a prophet. 2 Chronicles 29, verse 30. And he, at a time when Israel was, had won, is he's going to, the Arab peoples had, over the diaspora, had gone into the promised land of Israel. It was called Palestine in 135 AD. It was renamed Palestine. Never was really a country. It was always loosely defined borders, depending on whoever controlled the area. But it was called Palestine, and then in 1948, it became Israel. And so he was saying, I'm going to pluck out the evil neighbors from what is now going to be called Israel, put them back into their ancient homelands. And I'm going to pluck the Jews out who were living in some of those Arab countries there, lands, and bring them back into what is now going to be called Israel. So we saw that happen in 1948. Now, what he had to do, the Ottoman Empire had controlled the Middle East from 1517 to 1917. There could be no Arab states or Israel with them having control over that area. So in World War I, they got defeated, the Ottoman Empire, the Turks. And all of a sudden we find in the 20th century, the Arabs starting to get their states back. So for instance, Egypt was 1922, got its statehood. Saudi Arabia and Iraq were 1932. Iran, formerly Persia, was called Iran in 1935. Lebanon, 1943, Jordan and Syria, 1946, and then along comes Israel, 1948. So we see
So Princess Diana of the royal family, as you know, was murdered, and a lot of people say it was a ritual sacrifice, and some say she might still be alive. I don't know. But she felt that the royal family, they were not quite human, and she used to call them lizards, which makes us all think of reptilians. And knowing what we know now about shape-shifting reptilians, need to look back on what she thought about the royal family. She had a close friend named Christine Fitzgerald, and this is an excerpt from a transcript that was an interview with this Christine Fitzgerald talking about what Diana told her, and this is from the book Ike's The Biggest Secret. Christine said, "I'm sure of it. They had her doped from the start. Christine had many conversations with Diana, and she opened her heart about her nightmare life with the Windsors, but Christine's contacts through her work had given her access to other sources with inside knowledge of the British royal family, too. This was the first time she had talked publicly about her experiences with Diana and what she knows of the reptilian agenda. She told me, "The Queen Mother, now that's a serious piece of wizardry. The Queen Mother's a lot older than people think. To be honest, the royal family hasn't died for a long time. They have just metamorphosized. It's sort of cloning, but in a different way. They take pieces of flesh and rebuild the body from one little bit. Because it's lizard, because it's cold-blooded, it's much easier for them to do Frankenstein shit than it is for us. The different bodies are just different electrical vibrations, and they have got that secret. They've got the secret of the microcurrents. It's so micro, so specific, these radio waves that actually create the bodies. These are the energies I work with when I'm healing. They know the vibration of life, and because they are cold-blooded, they are reptiles. They have no wish to make the earth the perfect harmony it could be, or to heal the earth from the damage that's been done. The earth's been attacked for Xeons by different extraterrestrials. It's been like a football for so long. This place was a bus stop for many different aliens. All these aliens, they could cope with everything, including the noxious gases. They're landing all the time and coming up from the bowels of the earth. They looked like reptiles originally, but they look like us when they get out now through the electrical vibration. That life key I talked about. They can manifest how they want to. All the real knowledge has been taken out and shredded and put back in another way. The Queen Mother is chief toad of this part of Europe, and they have people like her in each continent. Most people, the hangers-on, don't know. You know about the reptiles. They are just in awe of these people because they're so powerful. Balmoral is a very, very nasty place. It's a crime scene now, apparently. That's somewhere they want to dig underground. They will find reptile fossils. It goes back that far. Don't think of people like the Queen Mother and Queen Victoria as different people. Think of them as the same person, which after a while has had to replace their coat. When the flesh dies, that energy, while it's dying, will be immediately up someone else's jacksie or backside. It's very vampire, worse than vampire. They're not going to come to you with hooked teeth and suck your blood. Fear is their food. They can actually take fear and manifest it into a tangible thing. The key is the vibrational current. At that vibrational current, they can manifest anything from anything. It's like a holographic image. We're all minerals and water vibrating. This is all an illusion we're living in. That's the secret. You know, when the monarchy's fallen, it's not the end of it. They will manifest in another form. The reptiles have never been defeated, and this is the closest they have come to it. The reason they are so threatened today is because the earth is in such trouble, and the mental power of people is returning. This is their most frightening time, but this is not going to kill them. There are long centuries before it's over yet. The difference this time is that it'll be more difficult for them, and they are going to have to settle for less, and the earth people are going to get more. But even though these reptilian ones are effers, they are sad, pathetic beasts, really. While humanity is galloping towards light, they're just pathetic lumps of nastiness who aren't going to win. I can't talk about this everywhere because they would just go, Christine, get a white coat, put it on backwards, get out. But I want an end to the BS. A few pictures for you. This is Balmoral Castle in Scotland, and this is what she was referring to. If you dig underneath or around the grounds, you'll find a lot of skeletons, and I'm sure a lot of rituals went on there as well, but it's a crime scene now. Interestingly, there is a pyramid near Balmoral Castle called Balmoral Pyramid that you can walk to. Why would a pyramid be there? Here is a picture I just found on the internet, and they're saying that her hand had changed into something that looked like the picture on the right, which is what they're saying is a reptilian claw. Man, I thought this was funny. Transforming. This was something put out to the British, like a press release. Something happened at some point where she shapeshifted in front of people. And they had to put out a press release. It didn't get a lot of attention. It says, earlier this week, Queen was seen by thousands of people in a form they are not acquainted with. We seek to reassure the public that the Queen is still their Queen and remains the respected and loved figure they have always known. While she may not be human, she may not be human. Now this is Pope Ratzinger. Now he's definitely some kind of vampire monster thing. I don't know, but that's not right. That is not normal. And remember, this is a famous picture. Putin has told senior staff, close associates, that he believes Queen Elizabeth II shapeshifted while greeting him as a show of strength and warning to not mess with the dominant reptilian Illuminati bloodline. Here's a close-up of her eyes. Reptilian eyes.
Jesus Christ lived obscurely for most of his life and never traveled far. He was maligned and rejected by many, though he had done no wrong. And yet billions of people now follow his teaching and find in him the guiding light for their lives. I am one of them because Christ's example helps me see the value of doing small things with great love.
The gospel is not finding a need and fixing it. The gospel is not solving a social problem. The gospel is not social justice. That's not the gospel. The gospel is we're all headed to eternal punishment in hell, conscious punishment out of the presence of God forever. But God has provided a rescue through the death and resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ. You're not talking about the gospel unless you talk about sin, repentance, Jesus Christ dying, rising again, and faith in him. That's the gospel. It's very easy to pile stuff on top of the gospel and then even eliminate the real gospel, but it has to do with the best news that anyone will ever hear, and that is you can escape eternal punishment, spend eternity in heaven.
I've got a clean copy of it now, and I warn you, this could scare you. Here's the email. Dear Art Bell, I just recently began listening to your radio show and could not believe it when you talked about the sounds from hell tonight. My uncle had told me this story a couple of years ago, and I didn't believe him. Like one of your listeners who discounted the story as nothing more than just a religious newspaper fabricated account. The story about the digging, the hearing of the sounds from hell is very real. It did occur in Siberia. My uncle collected videos and so forth on the paranormal, supernatural. He passed away fairly recently, but he would have loved your show. He let me listen to one of the audio tapes that he had on the sounds from hell in Siberia, and I copied it. He received his copy from a friend who worked at the BBC. It took me a while to find it tonight, but attached is that sound from my uncle's tapes. It's not the greatest quality, but the sounds are there. I was very hesitant to send you this, as the sound bothers me to listen to. I'd suggest that if you do play it on the program, warn listeners in advance so they may have the option of turning the radio off for 30 seconds while it plays. It has always haunted me. To those who discounted the Siberia sounds from Hell story, it is true, and I, for one, wish it wasn't. Rick, listening from Chicago. And so I submit now the cleaned, a better copy to you, and I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
That they're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. The Arab states got their statehood. This is a sovereign act of God. He said he would put them back into their lands. I'll continue to read these verses and show you how that plays out.
Yeah, now,
All right, thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you again next week.
Back to Doe just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOJ is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us, unfortunately. I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that Doge is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so did Trump. Trump's dead months ago.
Really?
Yeah. That is a doppelganger you're seeing running around. Because now what you have and what you're looking at is a bunch of mask-wearing people, right? Or, you know, I mean, the real Biden's dead.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so did Trump. Trump's dead months ago.
Really?
Yeah. That is a doppelganger you're seeing running around because the family is making too much money on rallies. That's what the family has said directly. Because as they make the wrong decision against the restoration of the planet and humanity as a whole, they somehow disappear. So they're given a choice and then they're removed. So now what you have and what you're looking at is a bunch of mask-wearing people, right? Or, you know, I mean, the real Biden's dead.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so did Trump. Trump's dead months ago.
Really?
Yeah. That is a doppelganger you're seeing running around because the family is making too much money on rallies. That's what the family has said directly. So you have a lot of leaders out there that are not the same persons. You know, people all of a sudden lose 30 pounds in a day, right? They show up the next day and they're, yeah, Putin's not Putin anymore. I mean, a lot of these people aren't who they are.
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds like after this show ends, I'll try to figure out a way that we can, actually start, fixing up this planet in real time. But right now, as far as I can tell, we have some house cleaning to do first. Is that right? I mean, who do we need to remove from systems of power? So, for example, why is someone like Victoria Nuland still out there? And what can we do to remove these people permanently from positions of power?
Well, the problem that I've run into, right? So we have ground command. We do have help. We have life force enforcement. And I also have a clearance under the Global Intelligence Agency, which used to belong to the Order of the Black Sun, but I have it now. I've had it for quite a long time now. So the GIA, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure the people that are not allowing the restoration of planet Earth and humanity to occur disappear. The problem is you have the mask-wearing thing in the White House, whatever that is. He's taking orders from the Secret Space Force, which is dwindling person by person by person, because as they make the wrong decision against the restoration of the planet and humanity as a whole, they somehow disappear. So they're given a choice and then they're removed. So now what you have and what you're looking at is a bunch of mask-wearing people, right? Or, I mean, the real Biden's dead.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so did Trump. Trump's dead months ago.
Really?
Yeah. That is a doppelganger you're seeing running around because the family is making too much money on rallies. That's what the family has said directly. So, you have a lot of leaders out there that are not the same persons. You know, people all of a sudden lose 30 pounds in a day, right? They show up the next day and they're, yeah, Putin's not Putin anymore. I mean, a lot of these people aren't who they are. But how do we stop them from talking to people, right? Whatever.
Yeah, and more specifically, they represent an institution. So the Putin avatar represents the Russian people. So I understand we're number 6 right now.
Yeah.
But so where's the root of all this? Like, so how do we find the people who are getting people to put masks on and pretending to be Biden, etc.?
Well, those are all operations that are run globally and jointly, and most of them are coming out of. Okay, so above these people that you're referring to, right, that we see cabal in the public, you had another group called the Covens, right, which is your Khazarian mafia's negative version of the Chabad, let's call them, right? Mm-hmm. And so then you had Coven Masters, and then above the Coven Masters, you had what we call the Parents. These are non-genetically modified humans. That's who you had there. And then you start going into the stuff that people can't see, right? We don't talk about that. All right, so on the parent level, the Order of the Black Sun parent, called the Dark Prince, he just had a code name, passed away a few years back, but he wrote something called the Program many, many, many years ago. And so the program was then given to all the agencies and all of the SSP, and they all started running the program. That's why we landed with COVID, and we had this and we had that, right? This was all laid out in the program. Now, there's a number of interviews out there with people that have participated in the SSP, right, who will tell you they all knew the timeline ended in 2012. It was supposed to be over for them at that time. And if it's the Order of the Black Sun, it was supposed to be 2018. They did get a 3-year extension from their gamma ray folks, right? and then that officially ended. So 2018, 2021. Mm-hmm. So, wow. Yep. So slowly but surely, all these treaties and covenants and agreements and help from the outside, let's call them negative forces, that they would have to conjure a demon or conjure stuff. They can't do that anymore. All right. So good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. Today we have the pleasure of having Benjamin Fulford. I'm sure everybody knows who Ben is. He's been around in the alt media for a long time, trying to get the truth out there about what's really going on in the world. So welcome, Ben. If you want to take a minute to introduce yourself, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about me after.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. First of all, it's March 10th, 2022, where I am. It's probably still March 9th where you are. But yeah, I basically, what my story in a very simple form is that I was Asia Pacific Bureau Chief for Forbes magazine, working in Asia for a long time. And I realized that Asia had all this money that they could use to make this planet a better place. And I tried to convince the Japanese government that they should use their money, to end poverty and stop environmental destruction. And they told me that they couldn't because they were under control of some kind of nefarious cabal. And so that started me down the rabbit hole. And I've been fighting these people who I call the Khazarian mafia, because they're not actually Jews. They worship Satan, but I've been fighting them nonstop for about 15 years. And I think we're finally getting close to defeating them. Now, could you please introduce yourself? I'd just like to know, I asked for this talk because my readers said that Kim Gogang is someone I needed to talk to. And because of the request from my readers, I reached out, and you were willing to talk with me, and I appreciate that. So could you please give yourself an introduction for people who don't know your work yet?
Sure. My name's Kimberly Gogan. I wear a lot of different hats. The level that I sit on would be very different than agencies and dragon families and whatnot. And I can explain that if you'd like. That's why I have the whiteboard over here, just in case you want me to do that at some point. I'm also ground command, not for any agency and not for any government. That's on a whole nother level. I do frequent, how would you say, we have other races living here, and some of them have gone. Some of them were pretty negative, and some of them are still here, and they're just looking forward to rebuilding. Several years back, I launched the restoration plan per the request of the Universal Council, to where I'm an ambassador on behalf of humanity, this version. And yeah,
Okay.
So been around the block quite a bit, been all over the world. Last time I was in Japan was when there was an issue in 2014 in you call it a volcano, I would have called it a group of people fighting over access to something they didn't need to have access to. So been to China, been to Russia, been all over Europe. I would say I started this journey, learned of my position probably about 2010, 2011. My position went firm in 2012, and then I've earned a couple of more along the way. I have never spoken to any of the Khazarian mafia, as you call it, directly. I am very well aware of them, very well aware of their activities in the world, and who they were taking orders from.
Okay, now that's interesting. As a policy, I try to stick to what people will call the 3D world, or the surface of the planet. And in other words, things that I can actually directly see and experience. And my problem with the UFO alien space stuff is that I don't see him walking around the street,
Sure you do. You just
do?
don't know it.
All right. Well, please, for those of us who are completely neophytes to this world, tell us who are these people? How can you prove they exist? What is their role?
Okay. Who are these folks? There are humans, there are people who were not humans. We were not the founders of an intelligent race on this planet. We as humans have been in existence for probably on this planet anyway, I would say for probably in this version, maybe 150,000 years, 200,000 years. There's a lot of evidence to that, which they leak out from time to time. And as far as the others, they are basically looking forward to restoring the planet after what you call the Khazarian mafia and their bosses destroyed it. So it's kind of what their role is today.
Okay, so I mean, there is a group obviously that is out to destroy the planet Earth. Now, they invited me to join them years ago, and they said that they wanted to kill 90% of humanity in order to save the environment. They also said that all the suffering in this world indicates that the creator is evil, and they want to overthrow the creator and replace the creator with Lucifer, who they think is a better option. So, I don't believe this stuff, but they describe themselves as fallen angels. And I was brought up as an atheist. I wasn't into this sort of stuff, but at least as a metaphor, it seems to work. So, what is your version of what these fallen angels are, who these people are, what they represent in the big picture?
Well, in the multiverse, you have, I would say, good and evil, right? And you can't classify a race of anyone, even humanity, as good or evil. That would be like saying, if you were to follow mainstream media right now, you would say all Russians are evil. I can tell you I've been there. That's definitely not the case, right? Yeah. Lovely people, really. And some maybe not, but for the most part, lovely people. Had a great time there. I was working there. I have heard the same story of the 90% annihilation of 90% of humanity. It has to do with, I guess, what if you're in the biblical sense, you would call getting as many human creator souls to hell, or the lower astral is really what it referred to. Their God is what I call the dark overlord. You call it Lucifer. You can call it whatever you want, but
I call it Satan. I think a lot of the people who think about Lucifer, if you look at their definition of Lucifer, it's very similar to the people's definition of God. In other words, it's a semantic issue. They use the word Lucifer instead of God, but there's a group that is clearly evil and want to, enslave or kill other humans. So I call them Satan worshipers, just to make it clear,
Yeah. Yeah, and you could call them that. I mean, whatever it is, let's put it this way. It's not in favor of life, of creating, of bringing us back to who we really were. We were a whole nother version of humanity before they genetically modified us to be the way we are, right? That's evident.
But how could you explain for my viewers don't know about this kind of stuff?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, on the surface level, you would have programs like Project Zygote. You would have all kinds of agency programs. As you may or may not know, the Black Sun controls the basement of Langley, as an example. Bush had how would you say it, a GMO ranch in Paraguay, where there's definitely has been cloning and manipulation, doppelgangers, all kinds of different stuff. And Hitler's main job was to find all of the artifacts and, the cross, the blood of Jesus, all of this stuff, so they could create the perfect human in their mind, right? Or try to figure out how to not create the perfect human. We have stuff spraying in the air all the time, as an example. We have these mRNA vaccines, which destroy the immune system. We have all these different things that are going on currently that you can see that are genetically modifying humans. The poison they put in the food, air, water. I mean, this is all to make sure that we lose that connection with God, because we are creators. And when you're directly connected to God, right, your creativeness is abundant. The information is unlimited. And we can do so many things as humans. We are a former shell of ourselves, and let's put it that way. Cellular degeneration is another one. We used to live to be hundreds of years old. We don't do that now because of rapid cellular degeneration caused by a number of different factors, obviously. Most diseases are man-made. They are not natural. They can target you now through your computer. They can target you through smart meters, all of these different things. And they are definitely trying to make sure you only survive so long, because they call it the Population Control Center, right, under Langley.
Yeah, I've noticed that, that they try to retire people just as they're starting to figure out what's going on. So it is a little bit like an animal farm. I once visited a pig farm for a Japanese TV show, and they have these huge, 1,000-pound male pig whose job is to impregnate the mothers. You have these giant mothers who live 50, 60 years. The male lives 80 years. And they have these baby pigs, and about 1 year old, they're sent off in a truck somewhere. And I think that's a good metaphor for what's happening to us, because I have confirmed, for example, in Japan, that they forced the Japanese Ministry of Health and Welfare to put all sorts of toxic substances in daily products, things in shampoo that destroy sperm, et cetera, and cancer-causing substances. So, yeah, there's clearly some agency that is deliberately trying to create a toxic environment. And the latest iteration was the 5G, which was like a low-level microwave defrost. And they killed millions of people in Wuhan with that. So, but where are these people headquartered? And what can we do about it? How can we put an end to this?
Well, in your articles recently, you've always talked about Lodge. I think you call it 999 or 99, or and then you have the Order of the Black Sun, right? I would say to you that they predominantly inhabit most of the basements of the buildings, like the Vatican and some places in London for sure. Um, Many other places in the United States, but they operate in the shadows, right? This is the founding fathers of Skull and Bones and all of these other people. They're everywhere, really. So yeah, that's who they are. Their job. Okay, so if you liken the Khazarian mafia to the line of Solomon, right? That's what they claim to be, and that's not just these Rothschild people, right? This is also all the Order of the Dragon is related to the same Khazarian mafia. So, for example, the Li family in China, they're a part of it. Not saying all of China is, but if you were to look at the CCP, you're talking to the Order of the Black Sun. So military orders, the Jesuits, all of these fall under the Order of the Black Sun. And they all take orders from someone somewhere.
That's interesting. I actually went to Italy to meet the Black Sun people. They're and they told me that they took orders from an entity that existed in the center of the galaxy that communicated with them through gamma waves. I found this very weird, but these people were definitely powerful. They told me they were going to fire the Pope, and they fired the Pope. And it's sort of I came to the conclusion that just like there's matter and antimatter, there's something known as anti-life that exists to destroy the life force. And there's a group of humans who betrayed their fellow living creatures in order to promote death. And these are these human or traitors to life that we need to deal with in order so that we can once again have immortality and exponential expansion. Like we're life. We're supposed to grow. We're supposed to put out flowers and babies and create more life. And that's what they're trying to stop. So what do you make of that? Do you think that's about right for the big picture?
Well, I do to an extent. I definitely do. I think what they told you was the truth. And there was a communication portal. I would say it was in the center of the universe. Located here in this galaxy, it would be like Satan's sidekick. I called him the destroyer because that's what he does. And so we are cattle to them. They look at us as energy providers. See, the difference between what you call Satan and God is that Satan needs God to create. Cannot create. So their motto is we have to destroy in order to create is correct, because they have to take God's creations and suck the life out of them basically, so they can then harness and use that energy in the plasma, which is in your person, to then create something new on their side.
So that's why they carry out human sacrifice?
Well, yes. It also creates fear and lack, which is what we all have to live in. Because, see, if you know how like when you're really, really happy, everything is right with the world, that connection with source is just really there. Or you're in love and you're with your partner and you're so happy, that creates a whole euphoria. And you feel more connected to God at that point, right? And you start thanking God for the things that you have. But if you're constantly running and you're living in fear and lack, you don't have that. It's harder to make that connection, and that's why they keep us running like that. You probably also notice like certain times of the year or just sporadically, all of a sudden you're tired and you want to fall asleep. That's because they're taking all that energy from you. It's also the reason why they have this big, how do you want to say it, obsession with Egypt, right? And the pyramids. Because they have the king's chamber on one side, the queen's chamber on the other side, and the capstone is missing for a reason. Because that energy has to go to their version of their king and their version of a queen. They also had a relationship with the Abraxas. family, which is related to I would call them the black nobility that you probably met in Italy, right? So you're talking about your Medicis, your Aldebrandinis. The reason why they call them Aldebrandinis is because they are from the Abraxas are from Aldebaran star system. So they're human, you know.
Human. Again, I found this very hard to relate to at first, but it's clear they really do need to suck energy out of us in order to keep themselves going. So now that we're trying to cut them off, what do you think can happen? I mean, the system, and what do you make of the situation in the Ukraine?
Well, it started out with a deal with the Russian oligarchs, right, and the Ukrainians, because they're the same. No mistake there. Have been the same. So in the news, the USSR fell and the Russian Empire fell. Completely and totally not true. Lenin was given his portion of the program and when he was exiled in Switzerland. Okay. So these are all the same people. Have been forever. Now let's flash forward to what's going on today. Okay. So the Russian oligarchs and the Ukrainian oligarchs had a deal. And the deal was they were going to leverage what they thought was oil within the country that had not already been leveraged. And they were going to pledge that plus a lot of cash, around $900 billion, to this new program they were going to develop in cooperation with their American partners in the Order of the Black Sun. Okay. So they put, first of all of that cash into a system that was in Norfolk, Virginia. And then they were going to do off-market trading using a system called ARPANET. You can look up ARPANET, ARPANET, I think it is. And so this was a system that was used, like you have the deep web and then you have the deep web, right? This is your military's, your I would say SSP more so than militaries. Your order people would function down here. And it's their version of a marketplace. So that's how it all started. So the deal was everybody was going to make a lot of money, right? Wars make money. And then until it didn't happen. And the oligarchs lost 80 something billion dollars. And then it got worse because they started to continue to siphon money until the tune of about 1.875 trillion between all of them. And so now they're sitting there. They've got some fixers and whatnot hired. So after it was clear that the Americans were not on the up and up, they couldn't pull off the program that they thought they were going to pull off, then Russia kind of started to back off a little bit. But the Ukraine is making so much money in donations from nations and military equipment and in all of that stuff, right? that they're keeping the ball rolling. I mean, Zelensky's making a ton of money on this acting job of his, right? We all know he was a former actor.
Yeah.
He had some weirdo music video that looked like some kind of gay S&M thing. Yeah. So anyway, but so they're still trying to keep it going and blaming the Russians for what they're doing. The Ukrainian military, however, and the Russian military have been working behind the scenes to try to secure nuclear power plants, to prevent another Chernobyl. And then the Ukrainian government went ahead and shut off the power there, and now they got issues. That just happened today. So honestly, if I was to say that the Russians were never involved, that would be a lie. But I would say that at this point in time, there's no point. Everybody's losing their money.
I see this. It's a little bit like the story of King Midas. He got one wish. He said, everything I wish I touch must turn to gold. And he starved to death, right? Because he can't eat gold. And what these people have done with their cryptocurrency, with their derivatives, with their hedge funds, is they're taking something that's real, like an apple, and they're multiplying it by 1,000 or even 100,000 or whatever times to create these fantastical structures. But if you take away that apple, then the whole thing collapses, right? And so what's happening is the people who control the actual real world economy, the oil, the factories, the farms. My understanding is that they're trying to cut off all this virtual stuff, and that's why you have people like like Zuckerberg saying, we're all going to go live in the metaverse, and they're trying to escape. But there's this fundamental underlying reality, the creation, and I think the creation, the actual original creator, or if you want to call it nature, is having an allergic reaction to this parasitism, and so we're dealing with something very, very historical. Do you think that's about right for people who are just learning about this stuff?
Well, I would say this. So I know you've talked to a number of different people that talk about collateral accounts, right? You've heard a lot about them. Well, they're not exactly as it seems. And there's a whole, so you had, just like you have dueling forces on this world, right? You have a dark AI and you had a light AI. And those were the main controlling systems. The dark one controlled the front end. The light one controlled the back end. And so you would have to go through the dark, right? That's how they made it. Well, that's no longer the case. A lot of things have changed. The contract, the covenant for the Khazarian mafia, as you call them, to continue with their money printing machine at the Federal Reserve is gone. They haven't had access to that machine in a long, long time. Now, secondly, the Order of the Black Sun also has spent a lot of money running operations under something that's only known as the program, and they don't have access to that either. We used to have what you call the underground world government, right? Which would have been above these people. They would control something called the Hall of Records. Now, that's why when you see a bill being passed, it says HR and then a number, right? And it's called a bill because it used to get submitted into the Hall of Records, and then this underground world council would either approve it or deny it or reject it. And if it was approved, then it would go on to the money magic machine in the back, then on through to the Federal Reserve, and then on out into like you said, 50 times, 100 times, whatever it is, right? Well, they haven't been able to do that in a long time.
Yeah, I know a concrete example was the Lehman shock in 2008. Yep. What happened was that they were cut off their money, and they went to the Asian families, the elders, and they said, look, we're going to put a black communist in as president. So could you please give us some money? And they were able to get 700 tons of gold from a guy called Johannes Riadi, who was an Asian royal. This was on the record in the UK House of Lords. And they took that to create 750,000 tons worth of gold-backed bonds and generated $23 trillion, which kept their show going until January of 2020. And that ran out, and they've been unable to, come up with a new scam. That's my understanding. But what's your view on this?
Well, Riadi, Sukarno, Marcos, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all of those people were just family people, and they were trustees. Now, to gain access to the real money-making machine, they would have to ask for permission from their superiors. They never had, okay, so as a trustee, right, you don't own anything. And he was another trustee, okay? Riadi was another trustee. That being said, most of the gold in Indonesia, right, was actually stolen from the Russians by the Dutch after the fall of the Tsar, okay? So 2 out of the 3 main, what you call bunkers, I call entryways to another place, which is what they were empty. I mean, were from Russia anyway, about a couple 100,000. And then you had the trustees that used to manage this, right? But you still needed 2 to get in and 3 to get out. So in other words, you had to have 2 people on the trustee level, and then you had to have the ultimate authorization from my then predecessor at the time.
Okay,
So
your predecessor. So you actually are you claiming to be in control of the system now, or what is
the
it? What?
alpha system.
Okay, and so what does that do? How much? What are you going to do with it?
It's not just money. What I've been doing with it? Well, it didn't come with a handbook.
Mm.
It's a very sophisticated AI system. So was the other one on the opposite side, which I did not have control over. It finally dissipated probably within the last 30 days. And so now the whole front end, what I call the front end of the system, is basically running on whatever's left. So the dark AI would have been tied to things like Watson. You're familiar with IBM's Watson, and DARPA would have been tied to that. Some of these other NSA would have had, and that was the ultimate power that powered everything. Okay. That's why it had so much processing power. That's why the banking system was able to grow so quickly in 1978. Now, on the flip side of it, you have the creator system, right? Or what you call the light system. And so only the creator can create. And so they would have to get money and permission from who was sitting in this chair before me. Now, it controls things like Stargate, Starnet, the internet system, the base platform for all internet. It has access to the base platform for all telecom. It has access to the base platform of all financial things, right? And this is the source of all of what you would call your off-ledger accounts or your off-ledger gold. As far as mined gold, now see, this system controlled not only mined gold, but also in-ground assets everywhere. So it has a lot of leverage and liens against everything. So the mine gold, the stuff you're talking about, 700 tons, this and that are in bunkers, they're not actually in bunkers. They're several levels down from the entryway point. So,
Okay, well, I've been following this bunker story for a long time, and I've talked to, for example, Japanese retired bank chairman who took military maps made by the Japanese of these bunkers. And I've tried very hard to get anybody to provide me proof that these bunkers really exist. For example, holding a recent newspaper in front of a stash of gold. And as far as I can tell, it's a giant fiction to say, oh, there's all this gold in these caves, and that's why we can print dollars. So, I haven't seen the proof that these things exist. I'm sorry to say.
Well, I can explain that to you. I have some books and stuff like that, and I can explain to you how they did it. But you've heard about like the red book. You've heard of the blue book, the black book. Well, the black book was the Order of the Black Sun stash when they had it. They don't have it anymore. But when they had it, that was their stash. So you see in some of these books, it'll say like CN 85124, right? Just random number. And that would be in-ground assets in China. So, and then you would have SA 12345. That's in-ground assets of Saudi Arabia. There was also Russian assets. I mean, everything. See, what the Khazarian mafia used to do, the way the system worked for the dark side, is you had to put something in order to get something out. So bit by bit, piece by piece, during their reign, they had leveraged everything on the planet, including all humans, birth certificate phones. You heard about those, right?
Yeah.
So by 2007, I was not in this position at that time. My predecessor was. He had acquired everything on the earth. Past, present, and future, including oil reserves. Everything had been leveraged. The Khazarian mafia was so greedy, they gave everything into to the other side system, right? And that in order to get pretty papers out. So,
okay, all right, go on. Sorry.
By March 2007, he cut them off completely because there was nothing left to leverage. In his words, he would have said, greedy little piglets. And I agree with him. Then it didn't take very long, did it, for your Lehman crisis to show up? Because the money-making machine was gone. and they've been trying to get it back ever since. That's why you have this Chinese elders are going to do this, and the, dragon families are going to do that, and the Vatican's going to do this, and everybody's going to pay out on some RV someday, every day, ending in Y.
Well, here's I actually talked to Dragon Family, Asian secret societies, the British royals, Rothschilds. I actually talked to them, and they've come up with a basic agreement that from now on, our purpose as a species is to increase the amount and variety of life. So more plants, more animals, more babies, and just let life flourish. And one of the mechanisms that we have proposed for this is to set up a meritocratic future planning agency to try to turn this planet into a paradise. So, would you be willing to help us with this project?
The Meritocratic Society? Absolutely.
Meritocratic, future planning.
150%. What we have done thus far on my end of it, we do have the Hall of Records, which means that we can register anyone at the same, at the same level as, like, for example, the United Nations, right? The United Nations doesn't have any charter, doesn't have any sovereignty, hasn't for a couple of years now. They know it, they've been informed, but yet they keep doing what they're doing. They don't have the authorization to do that. They don't have the authorization to have a standing army even. And they're also broke. So that's because no buttons are being pushed on this end of it. I'm not doing it. And then, so as far as what we are doing to go forward is, thus far, we tried to get what we call assemblies. You can call them whatever you want, councils from every area of the world, because no one knows your needs and your area better than the people who actually live there. They're living in it, right? Now, we may need guidance with, like, for example, a science research and development division that can give us the best technologies, or at least give us options that we may not be aware of to fix problems in our areas, right? So we formed what was called and we're going to rename it now because we had some issues, but the Global Peace and Restoration Consortium of Member States. It's a little bit lengthy, so we're going to shorten that. But what it's supposed to be is a gathering place of all of these people. So exactly like you said, meritocratic, right? I don't care where you're from or what you want to do. If you want to be a part of this change, you're more than welcome. It's not about bloodlines. It's about people. The one thing we require is that everyone that participates, whether it's on a scientific level or you're just merely identifying your needs in your area, is that you do not violate human rights.
Okay.
Or your fellow country people, right?
No, speaking about violating human rights, as you know, the United States has been at war for most of its existence. 81% of the wars since the end of World War II were started by the U.S. So, we want to bankrupt the U.S. corporation and set up a new political body, possibly headquartered in Idaho, to replace the U.S. corporation with a healthier, more competent new government that would include Canada and possibly ultimately Latin America. What do you think about this? Can you finance such a project?
Yeah, we can. And what we've been doing on our end of it is we've asked each state in the United States to form their own council. And then they collectively make the national council. So it's all of the people all of the time, right? There's no third party nanny. Governance, corporate or otherwise. I think if we all can learn and grow and we're not living in lack and fear, that we can at least get along enough to decide if we need a road or a bridge. Canada is doing the same. We have assemblies in just about every single country right now, or councils that are bringing their needs forward all over the African continent, all over Latin America. We have them everywhere. So we're doing the exact same thing. That's why your readers probably said, hey, you need to talk to this lady, because we are already doing it. It was just a matter of getting the cabal, so to speak, to basically go bankrupt.
All right. Well, okay. So I have support from the Asians and from the British Royals, etc., for this future planning agency. How can we actually get it started? What's the concrete step forward?
Okay. On my end of it, you have to file your organization. We file it within the Hall of Records, which is the records for all governments on the planet. And then you are returned back as an official entity. Okay. Then you go from there, and then you now need to submit your orders. We need 100 schools in Canada, say, right? So you then are writing up what you call a bill. That's why it's called a bill. And then that passes in the Hall of Records, but you have to have all your numbers right? So you got to make sure that, no one needs a $10 billion per student education, right? That doesn't make sense. But we do need to pay our teachers more, right? And we need, in some areas of the world, you're going to need security for kids to go to school, even, right? You're going to need school buses. They don't have those in a lot of places of the world. So we really have a lot of work to do in that aspect, but just taking one project. So once you submit that into the Hall of Records, then it ties into what's called the key integrated monetary system. There you go. So that is now the monitor for currencies and making sure we do not have what you call, a devaluation or a parity situation. And because
how do you go to the Hall of Records? How do you do that? Where do you go?
That's in my system. It's in the Alpha system.
It's in the Alpha
I have
system.
about 30 some odd screens. We don't use keyboards. Everything is run on these.
And this system, does it oversee China and Asia?
Yep. China would be under the impression, as an example, so would Japan, that the RMB people, the average everyday person, thinks that China issues RMB. That has never been the case. The allocation numbers always came through the Federal Reserve, right? That was the pass-through for the Khazarian Mafia, as you call it. So the Federal Reserve actually controlled even the ruble, the yen. I mean, if there's a currency out there, you would have to get your allocation numbers from the Federal Reserve. Well, as of right this minute, you do not have to do that anymore. All the allocations for new currency come from the Key Integrated Monetary System, or KIMS for short. So, yep.
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds like after this show ends, I'll try to figure out a way that we can, actually start, fixing up this planet in real time. But right now, as far as I can tell, we have some house cleaning to do first. Is that right? I mean, who do we need to remove from systems of power? So, for example, why is someone like Victoria Nuland still out there? And what can we do to remove these people permanently from positions of power?
Well, the problem that I've run into, right? So we have ground command. We do have help. We have life force enforcement. And I also have a clearance under the Global Intelligence Agency, which used to belong to the Order of the Black Sun, but I have it now. I've had it for quite a long time now. So the GIA, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure the people that are not allowing the restoration of planet Earth and humanity to occur disappear. The problem is you have the mask-wearing thing in the White House, whatever that is. He's taking orders from the Secret Space Force, which is dwindling person by person by person, because as they make the wrong decision against the restoration of the planet and humanity as a whole, they somehow disappear. So they're given a choice and then they're removed. So now what you have and what you're looking at is a bunch of mask-wearing people, right? Or, I mean, the real Biden's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so did Trump. Trump's dead months ago.
Really?
Yep. That is a doppelganger you're seeing running around because the family is making too much money on rallies. That's what the family has said directly. So, you have a lot of leaders out there that are not the same persons. People all of a sudden lose 30 pounds in a day, right? They show up the next day and they're, yeah, Putin's not Putin anymore. I mean, a lot of these people aren't who they are. But how do we stop them from talking to people, right? Whatever that is.
And more specifically, they represent an institution. So the Putin avatar represents the Russian people. So I understand
Mhm.
we're Putin number 6 right now.
Yeah.
But so where's the root of all this? Like, so you know, how do we find the people who are getting people to put masks on and pretending to be Biden, etc.?
Well, those are all operations that are run globally and jointly, and most of them are coming out of. Okay, so above these people that you're referring to, right, that we see cabal in the public, you had another group called the Covens, right, which is your Khazarian mafia's negative version of the Chabad, let's call
Right.
them, right?
Mhm.
And so then you had Coven Masters, and then above the Coven Masters you had what we call the parents. These are non-genetically modified humans. That's who you had there. And then you start going into the stuff that people can't see, right? We don't talk about that. All right, so on the parent level, the Order of the Black Sun parent, called the Dark Prince, he just had a code name, passed away a few years back, but he wrote something called the Program many, many, many years ago. And so the program was then given to all the agencies and all of the SSP, and they all started running the program. That's why we landed with COVID and we had this and we had that, right? This was all laid out in the program. Now, there's a number of interviews out there with people that have participated in the SSP, right, who will tell you they all knew the timeline ended in 2012. It was supposed to be over for them at that time. And if it's the Order of the Black Sun, it was supposed to be 2018. They did get a 3-year extension from their gamma ray folks, right? and then that officially ended. So 2018, 2021? Mm-hmm. So, yep. So slowly but surely, all these treaties and covenants and agreements and help from the outside, let's call them negative forces, that they would have to conjure a demon or conjure stuff. They can't do that anymore. So now they're left to think for themselves, which is quite evident when you see in plain view the failure to keep a narrative up for anything. They're constantly, if you're over in America, you can't even get access to RT anymore, right? English Russian news. I mean, the censorship, they're trying so hard to kick everything off YouTube, everything off of Twitter, everything. Everybody's getting booted, right? But they're running social media influencers, hot girls get vaxxed. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
So the narrative is failing miserably. They've lost the COVID. Just like, for example, the Omicron variant cured Delta. Anybody here? Nobody's got Delta anymore. It just cured it like that overnight, right? And then now Omicron was cured by Russia. Not literally, but in Ukraine. Overshadowed completely. We're not hearing about it anymore. Everything's opening back up. They've decided that was a failed operation, but it was on the list of the program.
So what's next? I've heard they're going to try a starvation crisis.
Oh yeah.
A fake UFO invasion. What have they got on their program?
The CIA has put the fake alien invasion off until 2024. So I hear the end of 2024, they'll be ready for the fake alien invasion. But yes, so the lifeblood of the world is oil and gas right now. It shouldn't be, but it currently is. That being said, they are hyperinflating the price of fuel for no reason whatsoever. We don't have a fuel shortage anywhere. Okay?
Well,
We have a prevention shortage. So in other words, they prevent you from getting the fuel. If you're not one of them, but we don't have a shortage. So they do these types of things so that they can then increase the price of food. Because why? Because our entire food supply chain is wrong. Why are you importing food in an extremely fertile country, right? Right where you are. There's no point to that. then they radiate it when it comes into America, so now we're eating radiated food with no nutrients whatsoever, and all we're doing is filling a hole. We're not actually feeding our body anymore. So yes, if the price of fuel goes up, the price of everything you eat, everything you buy, all consumer products are going to increase dramatically.
Okay, but at a certain point, though, right, the system's going to break. Isn't that what's going to happen? I mean, people are going to just start trading food for other things. I mean, I just can't see how they can sustain this. I mean, how much longer can they keep this horror show going before it all implodes?
See, that's because you have common sense, Ben. If you didn't have common sense, you would be them, and you would be going, we can do it. We can do it. No matter how many times they fail, they still try to do these things. Now, this is also going to fail. Okay?
Yeah, because I run into people who say they've got like $1 trillion for me, but could you please send $1,000 so I can pay my grocery bill? It's like, there's some kind of disconnect. All right, so I think we should probably conclude if things go on long. But all right, so how can we get from here to there? How are we going to put an end to this and start the planet on a nicer path that we all want? Where we're trying to turn this place into the paradise it's meant to be. How do we get from here to there?
Well, to finish the cleanup, I mean, first of all of humanity needs to participate, because I believe that God gives everyone gifts. Every human is unique, different, and brings something to the table. So the more people that we can bring together that have a like mind, like yourself and myself, then we'll get there. As far as their operations are concerned, just have to keep in your mind that in order to control planet Earth, right, which is who we want, what we want humanity to do, right? Sorry, I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning. It's late for me. So we have to look at military, intelligence, financial, media, right, and the justice system. So if we can get all those things on our side, on the side of humanity, they don't matter anymore. So far, we've pretty much got them backed into a corner financially. They are not going to be able to operate. It's very inexpensive to start a war, but it costs a lot of money to finish one. The Iraq situation was around $30 million a day. All right, so media. We started a news channel. The news channel, we structured it so that it's supposed to be every person can report from their respective area. And eventually that will grow if people are doing reports and they're like, oh, we're on TV, So it's a metacratic news agency is what it is. So when you say, hey, what's going on in Ukraine, we ask people to report from on the ground. Is this really happening? Right? And they give us little videos. They just do them on their phone. Doesn't have to be anything special.
Sending special forces into New York and Palo Alto, California to take over all the big media companies and all the big internet companies and force all the truth?
Do we want their media? We need their media. If we all could talk to each other, all 8 billion of us could talk to each other every single day and say, hey, I'm standing here. There's no hurricane, right? Or whatever it is. Do they matter anymore? Is anybody going to watch CNN? They're going to watch Cousin Bob because he's on there, right? You see what I'm saying? That's the idea behind how you take over the media without trying to take on a multinational corporation that's all, they're all CIA, right? You know that. I mean, or NSA or whatever. If you're in Russia, they're all SVR, that's just, everybody knows what a journalist is. Let's not lie, right? So they're regurgitators. They're not even trained to, find the truth. They're trained to tell people what their script says. See? Right.
There are actually there used to be real journalists who actually go to the real world and check facts from reality. Yep. That's what I try to do. But yeah, right now the corporate media has degenerated into the most incredible hysterical propaganda. It's kind of mind blowing. But I still think we need to move in and actually unplug them. It'll speed things up. But so getting back, so what about the military? We've got them in the corner financially. And I can see they're starting to lose the information war, but they're out there. I mean, a lot of people are still saying, "Hey, let's go kill Putin," and they're believing these lies. But what about the military, and what about the other centers of their power?
Okay, so several months ago, I think it's been about a year now, I created something called the Key Intelligence and Military System, which is the base platform for all intelligence systems. Part of the reason why you have everybody running around in circles and really going nowhere, I mean, they get so far, don't get me wrong, but they don't have enough data. They do have some what you call mapping systems, which say, well, if we blew up Block Country, the Banana Republic tomorrow, what would our chances of success be? And they'll say, well, 90% chance. Okay, great, let's bomb them, right? That's what they do. Militaries run under the program as well. And all militaries take orders from the Order of the Jesuits, right? Or from the Black Pope. And then eventually the SSP, right? So like here in the US, the reason why the Navy's so, I didn't want what you want to say, powerful is because they are the SSP. So that's where they intertwine, the secret space program folks. And so you just keep going up in the ranks until you get to the people you met, right? And when I met one of those people by accident, first thing they said when we sat down at the meeting was, "This everyone must die." I said, "Okay, you first."
I said that to them too, the same thing. All right, show us by example,
Yeah.
You want to kill 90%? Well, you go first,
Yeah, you first.
Okay, so, all right, so you need to control the military, the finance, and the media. And what about
intelligence, false information?
And what about visible political structures like the so-called Biden administration, the UN Security Council, the Chinese Communist Party? What about these visible political structures?
Okay, well, I'll tell you something. If the entire government is telling everybody you must do this to have a job, right? That's the way it was, and then they kind of back down on that. That'll come up again because the generals are now involved with Pfizer. But anyway, so fine, you create a bunch of corporations where you don't have to have this, right? To have a job. So you're just moving the ball. Now, for myself personally, I never gave up what the government had to say until COVID. I never even paid attention. I mean, I just kept doing my own thing over here, just talking heads. But they're going to go broke. They are broke. A broke military can't do anything. A broke intelligence agency can't do anything. You think these Taliban, Al-Qaeda offshoots that, the CIA created, do you think that they work for free? You can only promise someone money so long and not pay. Right?
Yeah.
So
okay, well, so I think I can see the picture. I believe we do need to have this whole thing implode first before we can rebuild. Unfortunately, but until that Biden show ends, and until they clean up all the cryptocurrency, money laundering, human trafficking, spam going on in the Ukraine, etc., all the biolabs. So I guess
you have contact with these people, right? I mean, these orders, who on. Okay, so the IRA runs the entire underworld, the mafia worldwide. Did you know that?
I did not know that, no.
Okay, underground, and they report to those people that you met with in Italy. So in order to end human trafficking, you have to provide them with an equally profitable business that is not going to hurt humanity.
Right.
So if you can negotiate with the IRA, then we'll end human trafficking overnight. I mean, you're always going to have a couple crazy people and pedophiles out there, right? Sure. But this multi-trillion-dollar annual business will go away immediately.
Okay. All right. Well, one last thing. A lot of people are saying that we're headed for some sort of singularity. All the timelines are converging, and that's coming soon. What have you heard about that kind of stuff?
I am aware of the timeline situation. Like I said, everyone, when they called in all those analysts to try to figure out how to stop the timeline from ending in 2012, it actually carried on until 2020. You're right there. Okay. January, well, December 2020 into December, because it's 1,008 years. So on an energetic level, you wouldn't have a timeline end on an 8. You would have it end on a 9, because that's a complete cycle. It's a complete energy cycle. So that ended then. And then you had some extensions and whatnot, like we talked about. So are we converging? No, we're not converging. What we're doing at this moment in time is you're seeing the end to the dark timeline and the beginning of the light one. And that's been going on now for, it's been, how do you say it, going like this?
Yeah,
it's starting to come back up.
I saw 2012 as like the changing of the tide. So at first it's just a little shift in one direction, but then it builds momentum and more until it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I guess we're in that process. But you know, I still want to get it happening sooner rather than later. And so maybe after the show ends, we'll try to stay in touch about setting up the future planning agency, and
Absolutely.
I'll try to get all these organizations who have agreed to a big project to make the planet a better place on board, and let's work together, okay? And we agree that, you agree, right? We want to have more plants, more animals, more babies, and turn this
restore how nature actually works.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with me. This is gonna.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming.
I'll have to take a bit of time to digest what I heard. It's new territory for me, but thank you, and I hope we can talk.
Well, thank you to your readers for having you reach out. So I appreciate them too.
All right, thank you. All right, well, bye then for now.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.
Back to Doe just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marcia Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that DOGE is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70